Well, welcome back. We are on page 139 for lesson 8, talking about our world. And this one is a challenging one, and I like that. I think it's a good thing that when we're being challenged, that's a big part of learning. And so you may have found stuff challenging already in the class. And sometimes what's challenging is the concept, right? What's challenging is, well, I don't know if I get what you're saying, but I'm not necessarily disagreeing with what you're saying. And then this lesson is one where we start to get a little more disagreement, and that's not a bad thing. Disagreement is okay. And again, that's part of how we learn. We wrestle with ideas. You may not agree with everything here that I'm about to say, but I really would challenge you to keep an open mind because this we are we sometimes don't when we come to the Bible, its ideas seem foreign to us. And so then we have to go back to what we talked about when we talked about the way the Bible gives us truth is through revelation. Remember, it's truth from outside of ourselves that God has to reveal to us. And that truth, if it's not something we would have come to, we have to align ourselves with that truth rather than saying, well, that truth doesn't align with me and my thoughts already. That's thinking really highly of our thoughts. If we think that the Bible needs to line up with them, rather we need to line up with it. And so some of this lesson may be challenging to you, but we'll talk through it. I really think this is an important one, if for no other reason than that. We're on page 139, as I said, and we're going to look at our world, and we're going to look at a few meanings. We're going to use a few meanings of the Greek word for world in order to explain what we're talking about with the world. So we're going to use three meanings from the Greek. So the Greek word is cosmos, right? We usually say cosmos. There was a show in the 70s with Carl Sagan called Cosmos, where he talked about the universe and all of that. And so we're gonna go through three meanings. The first is the actual created world that you see around you, nature itself. The second is going to be the system of the world, the way that it works, the way that people work. And then the third that we're going to look at is the actual people who make up the entire world. There's a fourth meaning in Greek, which is the arranging of one's appearance, which is actually where we get our word cosmetology. So in cosmetology, you're arranging your appearance to make it ordered and right. But that really is so linked to this first meaning of nature that I don't make it its own thing, but it's kind of an interesting fun fact for you, for your friends later. That's where cosmetology comes from, or cosmetic. It's something arranged to be beautiful and orderly. And so that's our first real definition of the world that we're going to look at is the world that God created, the world He created with order and functionality, and there's so much system to it, right? If you ever watch like a nature documentary and you're watching the lion hunt the gazelle, and you're rooting for the gazelle to get away because you're nice, kind human beings, and yet you realize if lions don't survive, then ecosystems break down, and if there's not enough gazelles, ecosystems break down. If there's not enough grass and everything, the more and more scientists look at it, the more and more they learn that things really are set up as a system, as a whole. And so we're going to talk about how God created the world that way. I love this quote here from Basil of Caesarea, way back in the 4th century. He says, "Each of the things that have been made fulfills its own particular purpose in creation. Not a single one of these things is without worth. Not a single one has been created without a reason. Recognize greatness, even in small things, adding continually to your wonder and causing your love for the Creator to grow." I think that is the perfect quote for this section of the lesson, because we definitely see that God created everything, and when He created it, if you're familiar with the creation account in the very first 2 chapters of Genesis, God said everything was good, and He says it again and again, 6 times. It was good, it was good, it was good, it was good. Everything was good, meaning God brought the right order. God created it the right way. And still to this day, we'll talk about how things got messed up, but still to this day, we see the incredible amount of detail and order that God orchestrates, and we should be able to praise Him for that. When we talk about, and we've mentioned this before, this idea of cosmic and concrete, or sometimes I say that heaven and earth in the Bible are smushed together. They're always being pushed together. In other religions, other philosophies, apart from the Bible, sometimes these are separated out so that the divine is separate from the human, and you can't approach God except maybe by special means. You separate out where there's a realm of the gods and they don't really interact with earth. You maybe separate out where these things are too holy, or they're too, you can't approach. Whereas in the Bible, they're always together. So God creates the earth, and we see him then put man on earth, and then we see him interacting with man where? On earth. God comes into the garden to interact with Adam and Eve. God is there on earth with them. And so this idea that we have sometimes that what is earthly is not what is heavenly is actually really from Greek thinking. And you and I, whether we know it or not, we in the West, we would say that we're in the West, Europe and North America, we really inherited and adapted Greek ways of looking at the world. The Greek way of looking at the world, especially starting with Plato, was that there is so they already had this idea that there's a mountain of the gods. Really, it's a realm of the gods. You can't go to the mountain and see the gods that are there. They live in sort of another dimension, okay? In the stories, the gods would interact with the world, but after a while, the Greeks became uncomfortable with those stories and actually started to say that they were merely symbolic. They weren't literal stories anymore, because the idea of gods acting human, there was a guy named Ovid, and he got real uncomfortable with that and said, they must just be allegorical, so they're not literal. So the Greeks continually separated out the divine realm and the earthly realm. Then Plato would talk about that there's a perfect form, he would say, of everything. There's this perfect version, we would use the word maybe version, of everything here on earth. There's a perfect version in the realm of the gods. And we have lesser versions of that here on earth. So again, separating those things out, separating them out. You don't have to know Greek philosophy or worry about all of that. What I want you to realize is that we adopted in many ways that mindset that heaven and earth are totally separate things. The Bible does not think that way or teach that way. The Bible is pushing them together. Remember God in the Garden of Eden, and then we have, where does Jesus come? Jesus comes in human flesh to the earth. There was actually a controversy in the very early church going on about whether or not that could possibly be true, because there were these Greek thinkers who were saying, no, Jesus couldn't have had a body. That would be corrupting. That would be wrong. That would be evil. And so they believed that he was like a hologram. Other school of thought within that was saying that he, when he went to the cross, it was his divine nature left, and it was only his human nature on the cross. This is not biblical at all. And First John actually argues against this, saying, in the opening, that we touched him, felt him, right? He was real. All that to say, the Bible does not draw this stark line between heaven and earth. We're about to talk about, in this lesson, we'll talk about angels and demons, and we'll say that they are not physical in the way that we think of as physical, but nevertheless, the Bible would push these things together by what? Number one, God created earth, so earth is a good thing that he made and wanted for us to live in. Number two, he comes to us on earth, okay? Number three, he takes on human flesh. Number four, the Bible, we said when we talked in lesson, lesson one, that the Bible is both a human and divine document. And then number four, Peter tells us in his letters that we now have a divine nature. We are partakers of the divine nature, so that we are now both human and divine. So the Bible is always pushing those together. When we go to the end of the Bible story in Revelation, the last couple chapters, it talks about a new heaven and a new earth. So it needs to be made new, it needs to be renewed, but at the same time, God's eternal plan is not us on clouds playing harps in some other sphere and other dimension. Actually, it's very earthly. and it talks in those chapters about the nations bringing their glory, it says, into Jerusalem, meaning bringing probably riches and their culture into Jerusalem, which is a physical place. And they come from a physical place to travel to a physical place. And so there's movement around still a world, an earth. And so this idea that all that is physical will be done away with and will just be these ethereal spirits. 2 Corinthians specifically says, no, 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 no. We are made to have bodies, and even after we die, we will have resurrected bodies again. We will not be disembodied spirits forever. Okay. He uses the imagery of clothing and tents, that we would be clothed, that we would be within a tent. It uses that imagery, but it's talking about having a physical body. So I hope that makes sense. It's kind of a big concept, but this is kind of the first step. This is me dipping your toe into the idea that the Bible's idea may not be your idea, and so you may have gotten your idea from human culture, and we need to realign ourselves then with what the Bible says. Okay, moving on here a little bit. That sets us up for what we have here, where we talk about on page 140, next page, our response or our responsibility. That's why I put ability in parentheses. It's our response. Then that's what we're always looking for in the Bible, is what's my response? If this is true, how then do I live? How then do I respond? What then does it mean for me? What does it mean about me? So if God is the creator of a good and ordered earth, how then do I respond to that? Well, to put a little, to sneak one more thought in here, though, first, is that we say that the world became corrupted through sin. And so now it doesn't function exactly like it should. Great example, disease. Disease is not something that should have been there, that wasn't designed originally, but God allowed it in as part of sin, along with death. Along with actually something that we deal with on a daily basis, maybe at your house, weeds. There is no horticultural reason for weeds. There's actually no really botanical definition of what a weed is. They're usually, scientists say, they're opportunistic plants that reproduce very easily. So they can function with very little water. They're very durable. They sometimes have good defense, little pricklies and things like that, and they spread like weeds, right? They spread through, they can puff their spores out. You try to pull them, and if you don't get the roots, man, they're right back, right? Why? What makes weeds different? Really not very much. But when we look in the biblical account in Genesis 3, it says that weeds are a part of the curse. That now the earth will still function, but it's always going to function in kind of a twisted way, a bent way. It's never going to function like it should. It still will do what it's supposed to do, but it's sort of mutated, if you will, would be a good word. And so weeds are part of that. The earth is supposed to flourish and produce plants, but these are fruitless, pointless plants that choke out fruit-producing plants and beautiful flowers and things. And so they are part of that. The Bible describes them as thorns and thistles in Genesis 3. So all that to say, what's then our response? Well, I want to read this carefully here on page 140. It says, the physical world is made by God and is not some separate realm from spiritual things. Therefore, it is important to God. Let me pause for a second and read that again. Therefore, it is important to God and should be important to us. Have you ever made something? Have you ever written something? Have you ever painted, created, crafted, fixed, whatever? You built something and nobody cared. And maybe they proverbially stomped on it, spat on it, got rid of it, whatever. You made a toy for your kid and they hated it and threw it in the yard. Ooh, how does that make you feel? That thing was important to you, right? That thing was important to you, and it wasn't important to them. So we should say that here and then move on. They fulfill. I lost my spot. Therefore, it is important to God and should be important to us. God cultivates and enjoys his creation. How do we know he enjoys his creation? I would say two ways. One in the Bible and one that I think we get logically. One in the Bible. When God is creating and it says it was good, it was good, it was good. And then on the seventh day, he what? He rested. Because he was tired? No, God is infinitely powerful. We learned in lesson 3. God does not get tired. Rather, he rested in the sense of enjoyment. He enjoyed it. So there's my biblical reason that I think God enjoys creation. Uh, the second one from logic. There are things in creation that we know that we don't know about. For example, we don't know what other planets and stars and nebula and microscopic creatures and we even, have learned that our eyes can only see a certain spectrum of what's there and the colors that are there. Uh, God clearly knows way more that's there than we do. So is that for our enjoyment? I don't think so. I don't think even in the course of human history, if we lived billions of years and science advanced for billions of years more, I don't think that we would ever discover all there is to discover that God has made. So who's enjoying these things? What's their purpose? I believe God enjoys them. I believe God enjoys these things. I believe God likes to see the storms swirl on Jupiter. I believe God likes to watch asteroids collide into each other. I believe that God loves beauty, even beauty that we can't comprehend. And so, if God enjoys these things and we are made in His image, we are then made to reflect who God is. We are designed to enjoy and care for these things. Adam and Eve in the garden, they were first given the job of tending to creation. They were to cultivate the garden, and Adam was to name the animals. And then, did you ever notice what it says there? God brought all the animals to Adam to see what he would name them. There's this sort of playfulness in that sentence, to see what he would name them. I wonder what he'll do. Now, is God wondering in the sense that you and I are wondering and going, I don't know? No, but I think he's kind of there's a playfulness there to God that not only would create beautiful things, but would say like, now you be part of it. If you have kids or you've been around kids and they're playing with toys and they're pretending, they want you to pretend with them. And that may be kind of awkward for you, and you might be like me, I'm a very dignified adult and I have a beard, and maybe you don't have a beard, but I wear collared shirts and I go to work and I don't play with toys and I don't pretend. Well, God seems to play with toys a little bit, huh? God seems to enjoy creation. God has a playfulness to him. He has a creativity to him. And so I think what he's almost doing with Adam, and don't accuse me of heresy here, but he's saying, hey, you be part of this too. You be part of this too, and you enjoy it too, and you get to be creative too. You come up with creative names for these animals. We don't know what Adam named them because we don't use those names anymore, whatever they would have been. But nevertheless, God is saying, hey, play with me, come create with me, come enjoy with me. And this is very early on in the Bible story and before the fall, before sin. And so this is part of how God designed his relationship with us to be. On that note, then, how do we cultivate creation? Adam and Eve did it by literally, they were supposed to, I don't think they ever got around to it before sin, but they were supposed to extend this garden and be fruitful and multiply, let the garden feed them and have many children. And so they were supposed to extend what God had started. How do we do it today? Part of it is we have a responsibility to take care of God's world by, one, treating animals kindly. Proverbs talks about, as do some of the Old Testament laws, which I can't call to mind right now, but it's in both of those places that we should treat animals well. Maintaining healthy environments. Why? Because that's healthy for people. So if we care about people and we care about God's creation, that's why I remember talking with somebody who would, as a kid, he would travel to East Germany, right? And he said in East Germany, they'd be walking by, and there'd be factory sludge in the street, just toxic sludge sitting out there around where kids are playing. There's a documentary I saw about a Chinese company taking over an American factory, and they were dumping toxic waste out the drain in the back of the factory parking lot until the Americans said, you cannot do that here. And they were like, but it's, for them, it's efficient and it's cost effective. And we don't want to pay the fee and the haul away fee and the processing and the liability insurance and all that stuff. Which to some of us we go, okay, that makes sense. But what is worse is dumping toxic waste down the drain, right? Okay. Stewarding environmental resources. So we don't just waste stuff. You and I live in California, if you're watching this locally, And we understand the word drought, and we've heard the word drought for many years. And drought can be rough, and we see the lack of rain, and so we are careful with those resources. We maintain order among chaos in nature. I remember, not I personally remember, but we used to be part of a property in Belize where there was an employee who literally year in and year out, just every day, their job was to beat back the jungle, to cut back the jungle so that there'd be a place there inside the jungle to function. That's part of this responding to creation is we do have dominion over it. They weren't burning down the entire jungle. That's not what was happening, but they were cutting back the border to because otherwise it would just overtake everything. And so that bringing order, it could just be, by the way, this could be as small as, again, pulling weeds in your yard. Weeds are essentially chaotic, and you're bringing order back to creation, right? Feeding people, feeding people. That could be on a large global scale in terms of a food crisis. It could be on a smaller scale. It could be at a medium scale in terms of a farmer, a farming family who's no one really thinks about them, and nobody really considers where that chicken came from on their plate, or where that salad came from. But somebody had to use and cultivate creation in order to feed others. And Jesus seems to be into feeding others, if you've noticed. Preventing damage or recovering from natural disasters. This happens all the time. Why do we have natural disasters? We would say that is a mutated function of the world where it's violent and deadly, and it wasn't originally meant to be violent and deadly, but now part of sin is that the world, we say, is not functioning as peaceably as it would have. So then we respond to that by helping people, by taking care in those situations. And you might be like, Andrew, I think you're reaching here a little bit on some of these. How is that? How does that have anything to do with the gospel? Again, keep an open mind. So if creation is important to the Lord, and if creation is corrupted through sin, and if redeeming and bringing us back from that corruption of sin is part of God's purpose, and allowing us to enjoy and be fed by and cared by from his creation, right? This is God's gift to us. Then is it such a leap to say that if we go and bring fresh water to a hurricane area, that's not part of responding to creation and caring for people within it? Okay. Healing the sick, healing the sick. So just medicine and caring for people and taking care of people using anything from, if you're more on the herbal kind of end of things, to more of the Western medicine kind of end of things. Anywhere in there's a process of using, whether it's herbs or whether it's chemicals, and doing the work to try to take care of people using nature. And then furthering scientific discovery. Sometimes I really believe, and I kind of wish the scientific community would just admit this, that we further scientific discovery just because we're curious people who love to know things. Some of the studies that you hear come out, or you're like, how did you get funding for that, are pretty not always the most helpful things in the world. Like they don't really benefit us, and yet they awaken our minds and our imaginations, and scientists always make this utilitarian argument. Well, somehow this will benefit our further knowledge, and we'll use the technology we learn here over here to help people. And I go, just admit it. You just love knowing, how to collide particles together. Like you just love knowing how I don't know how this aspect of wind works. Like you just admit that you God made you curious, and you love knowledge, and there's nothing wrong with that. But then some scientific discoveries do more directly help people, right? We're able to, I'm amazed. I talk to people at church, and they're like, I'm getting, when maybe it's a hip replacement or knee replacement, and I'm like, oh, are you okay? Who's going to help you recover? Like, oh, no, I'll be walking the next day. And I'm like, wow, we've come a long way, right, in being able to do some of these surgeries and things. So I want to ask you this, to reflect on this on page 140. I know because I told you I'm not going to ask you the reflection questions. You're like, I skip all of those. I want you to think about this one. Does caring for creation seem to be a Christian or secular pursuit to you? A Christian pursuit or just a worldly, non religious pursuit? Let me tell you this. Historically, Christians were far more likely to care about and care for creation than non-believing people. That has shifted over time. And I would ask you to think about, because usually what we hear is, that's a political movement and a political idea. It can be politicized, but we had it first. And we have a reason, a better reason than anyone else, I believe. We have a better reason to take care of creation because we know that it honors the God who created the creation, and it honors his purpose of making it for us and for others. You know who in the Christian community tends most to care about creation is missionaries. Why? Because they live in those countries where there's sludge in the streets. They live in those places where there's deforestation, which causes landslides, which breaks apart people's homes. They live in places where people have maybe cut. If you ever look up a photo of the border between Haiti and the Dominican Republic, in Haiti, poverty is so bad that people cut down the trees to make charcoal to have some kind of cash crop to sell. And right on the border is Dominican Republic, and there's all these trees. And so with deforestation, the ecosystem starts to break down. When the ecosystem breaks down, not only do you get things like landslides when it rains, because there's no tree system to hold things in place, you lose pollinators, which hurts your crop yield. You lose, predators and prey cycles with different, birds and larger mammals and snakes, and the whole thing starts to get messed up. Why? Because there was such poverty. But missionaries often are talking about, I remember one coming to our church and talking about how they had a way to help people get more rice out of a rice plant. Well, that's a creation care and a scientific thing that's actually, part of helping people to be able to live, which is part of gospel care for people as we give the gospel and we help them to thrive physically. I hope this is all making sense. What I'm getting at is it's all kind of connected. It's all kind of connected. And so we can say, no, that's secular, that's political. And here's usually the argument that we make, especially us who are premillennial evangelicals. And if that term means nothing to you, don't worry. But here's the argument that gets made. It's all going to burn anyway. It's all going to burn anyway. If I came to you, some wizard came to your house and was like, I have a prophecy for you. Your house will one day burn. You don't know when that's going to happen. You don't know when that's going to happen. Let's say this was the house that your grandfather built with his bare hands for your grandmother, right? Your children were born in this house. You have memories in this house. You have to live here for an indefinite period of time. And if somebody told you one day it will be gone, would you then just start banging holes in the wall and like spray painting on it and dumping trash in the living room and lighting fires in the bedroom and no, you wouldn't do that, right? And so I think the logic of it will one day burn is not a helpful biblical idea. That is by the way, the Bible doesn't describe it as simply as that either. You can go read the end of Revelation. It's not as simple as that. But the world will undergo great, horrible things and great chaos in the tribulation period. God will either make a brand new one or renew it. The Greek word can be translated either way, so we're not really exactly sure. But we live now. We live now. And so I want you to be cognizant of that. We can talk more in class. People always disagree with me on this, but we can talk more. But I want you to be willing to open your mind to new ideas, even if those ideas sound like, wait, those sound like not our ideas. They are our ideas. We kind of had them first, is what I'm saying. Okay. Enjoying creation. Why does God give us creation to enjoy? God designed us to enjoy it. I like this picture here. If you've ever been in the Grand Canyon, there's a place called the I think it's called the Watchtower. I can't remember if it's the Grand Canyon Watchtower or what the exact name is of it. But this plaque is there, and I think it's just really cool. It says, "All the earth worships thee. They sing praises to thee, sing praises to thy name," from Psalms. With which definitely you can see there, just has that overlook of the Grand Canyon, and standing there. I don't care if you're an atheist or what, and it's true that a lot of secular people really, they've kind of replaced God with nature. But at the same time, I don't think you could stand at the Grand Canyon and not just have a sense of awe and wonder if maybe, just maybe, there is a God that makes pretty amazing things. And so there are ways that we just enjoy creation, right? Appreciate its beauty. Why do you think the Grand Canyon is beautiful? Why do you think a sunset is beautiful? There is no reason at all. So if evolution is true and we all evolved and we're all just bent to survive and reproduce, a sunset doesn't help that. A Grand Canyon doesn't help that. Loving the color blue and green or seeing coral fish swim around a reef and thinking it's beautiful doesn't help that. So maybe, just maybe, God designed us to just enjoy creation and praise Him by enjoying it. We enjoy learning about it. I love a good nature documentary. I love going to the zoo. I love being on the zoo tour and hearing different facts. And I've been a bajillion times and always get a new good fact, and I like that. We marvel at God's glory behind it. We enjoy food. We enjoy food. Yes, this is also part of enjoying God's creation, that you would just love food. We enjoy outdoor activities. Maybe just want to go for a hike, go walking. We find joy in the work of cultivation. You may love to, trim your rose bush and watch it grow, and you may love to, order your backyard, and that's all kind of related to this. We talked about the effect of the fall, which is basically that Earth does not function as it was meant to. And so you can read through that section. I've already kind of mentioned that, so you can read that on your own. When Jesus comes along, we talk about his miracles, and some of his miracles help and heal people, and some of his miracles show his mastery and power over the earth. Think about him walking on water. Think about him calming the storm, right? Cursing a fig tree, which is sort of a 2-for-1 deal, because he's both making a prophecy about Israel and their unreadiness for his return, and he's also showing that he has this kind of power over nature. And so look at Jesus' miracles and say, okay, he's clearly also showing that he has this power. One of Jesus' miracles that he does often is he casts demons out of people. And that might freak you out too. That may or may not be part of your current worldview, that has anything based in reality. And yet the Bible talks a lot about angels and demons. I, full disclosure, did not know where to put this section. It needed to be in the lesson somewhere, and I could not figure out where to put angels and demons. And so I put them here because I didn't have a better place for them. I don't know. But here they are. So real briefly, and you can read these. I tried really hard to put passages that I thought would be helpful for you to see these things. Because we have, again, this is another place. We have very cultural ideas about angels and demons that are from movies and postcards, not of demons. If you get a demon postcard, that's scary. I guess people don't do postcards, but there's like angel art and stuff, and those aren't really based typically in the Bible's description of angels and demons. So I want you to read through them, and I want to make one note. So angels, you can read that. I feel like it's self-explanatory. Then take angels, and I want you to transpose that onto the demons part, because as the first one there on demons says, demons are by nature angels. They are the angels who rebelled against God. This is why they are alternatively referred to as fallen angels or evil spirits. So everything we said about angels, basically in the way that they function, that goes for demons as well. So we don't need to write a ton about demons. But I want to say a couple things. Number one, some things that have crept into our culture and our Christian evangelical world that are maybe not biblical. One of those is that demons are reading your thoughts. The Bible does not talk about demons reading our thoughts. It does talk about doctrines of demons or teachings of demons, so that maybe demons can speak things to people but not read our thoughts. I believe that demons are real, by the way. I believe angels are real. I believe the devil is real. I believe that they can observe our behavior, that they can mess with us, there is some variation though on some of these things in schools of thought. So there's one theologian in particular that's pretty well known these days. He would say that demons do not, as we say, possess somebody, as in completely control them, but can influence them and to the point where they're just such a huge influence in that person's life and body, but not that that person is a complete puppet of the demon. I don't know. Here's what's hard. Is the most we see of this is in the Gospels and Acts. That's where we see most of this idea. And so there's not like this huge ton of biblical information. The second thing that's hard is that we're using a lot of what's called anecdotal information, stories we've heard. Okay, stories we've heard, and that's not the same as the Bible, but it shouldn't be discounted. But we got to be careful. We got to be careful, making sure those I heard this story of. Well, does that line up with what we see in the Bible? Does it not? We got to watch ourselves. And what really I see this a lot, is that people will start just coming up with. There was a famous book back in the 1700s called Maleficus Maleficorum. It was the hammer against wickedness and demons is what they called it. This book was like a cookbook for how to deal with witches and demons. And we kind of laugh at that as though you could make a cookbook, as though you could just, well, if this happens, do this. And yet we kind of share stories that way. And if you're like new to the church and you're like, this sounds crazy, just brace yourself, I guess. But people will say, if you do this, a demon can come into you. And if you have this kind of emotion too much, it's a demon and you need to do this. And if you, be super careful if you or people around you are kind of outlining that they have this super, put together how to identify and deal with demons manual. No, I don't think it's quite like that. At the same time, there's this spectrum that we want to be careful of. So on the one hand, we don't want to see demons and the devil behind everything. I remember a family one time that was at church here, and their car was just kind of broken down, if you will. Wasn't well loved, that car. I guess it had been well loved. It was pretty worn out. And it broke down on the way to church, and they said that was the devil. The devil broke our car too, so we couldn't get to church. And I was young at the time. Now I would push a little harder, but at the time I'm just going, okay. And in my head I'm like, no, you need to repair your car. Like, your car's a mess. It always has, it's just an old car. And the devil. So part of it is the devil is not, we give the devil way too much credit. He's not all knowing like God is. He's not all powerful like God is, and he's not everywhere like God is. So I kind of doubt that the devil is really, really concerned with one family's minivan in Marietta on the way to church. I don't think so. I think it's a little too much credit for you. We could go on and on and on and on and on this topic, but my basic thing I want you to walk away with is, we don't want to see the devil and demons behind everything, nor do we want to go the other way and see the devil and demons behind nothing. We want to be careful. We also want to be careful. We want to understand that there is such a thing as mental illness. So just as our our heart, our veins, our joints can be messed up, our brain can be messed up. We think of Alzheimer's patients, and nobody would ever tell an Alzheimer's patient, just snap out of it. You're allowing, you're allowing your emotions to get the better of you. No, we know that Alzheimer's breaks down brains. If you've, people get traumatic brain injuries. on the job, in war, in car accidents, and it changes their emotions, their personalities, their abilities. And so we know that the brain, when diseased or damaged, creates problems. And so we as a church believe that mental illness is a real thing, and that there can be problems physically with the brain that affect other problems. So that doesn't mean that all mental illness is demonic or demon possession or from a demon. And so I really want us to be careful with this, because this can get way out of hand really, really quickly. Okay. But you can read all of this on your own, and then you can ask questions. We can talk about it. All right. And this video is going a little long, so I'm going to try to speed up a little bit here. The second meaning of cosmos here on page 145 is the world system, the world system, the way the world functions. Think more on a societal level, a political level. Okay, so the Bible tells us that we are not of this world. What does that mean? That we are not of the creation of the world? Nope. We, like everybody else, were made from the dust of the earth. Okay, it means that we are not part of the world system, not part of the world system. All right, we need to be separate from it, and we're going to talk more about this in class. But this is where we as Christians, especially in a very religious country, which we still are, by the way, we often, this may be challenging to you, we often say, hey, we're in the world but not of the world. It's kind of a Christian slogan. We're in the world but not of the world. And then we turn around and we have all of these arguments about how this political group, party, or individual or candidate or whatever is better than that one. And it's like, sorry, that's all within the box of the world system. We're not within that box. Tim Keller talks about, and I recommend him to you, just very, very, very approachable. He has a podcast called Gospel in Life that I actually listen to a lot. Tim Keller talks about how if you talk to a real Bible-believing Christian, there's times where they're going to seem really, really politically liberal. And there's times where they're going to seem really, really politically conservative. And you're going to have a hard time pinning them down. And he actually had this experience with somebody who couldn't figure out politically where to peg him. He says on social issues, you seem really liberal. And on sexual issues, you seem really conservative. And how do we, I don't know how to peg you. That's a good thing. That's because we don't live in the box that only gives us this option and this option. And the other options are a distraction from the vote. You have these two options you can vote for. And so I have to fit into one of those two options in the box. And so which one best fits the Bible? That is the wrong way to go about that thinking. The right way to go about the thinking is, I'm not stuck in that box. You cannot build a box for me. I live in God's kingdom, and when God's kingdom tells me this is the value system, it might just so happen that you line up with me. I'm not here to line up with you. I'm not here to agree with your platform. You can agree with mine if you want to, and when you don't, then I might look this way. And when I do, I might look that way. And I might be confusing to you. You might have a hard time pinning me down. There's a popular term going around right now, politically homeless. And really, I think that's an apt term, because it should be that it's very hard to fit ourselves into one of these boxes, because does God live in a box? Does God's ways live in a box? Does the Bible live in a box? You're like, yeah, mine does. I keep it in a box to keep it nice. I don't mean a physical box. You should be hard to pin down politically, because we follow God's kingdom, not the world's kingdom, even when the world's kingdom says, no, we are you, we are God's kingdom. God's kingdom is God's kingdom, okay? That's why you have more in common with a Christian in another part of the world than sometimes you do with an atheist here at home, okay? Because the Bible is cross-cultural and it's global. It's not, the kingdom is not this hyper-local thing, if that makes sense. Okay, does that mean we don't vote? Does that mean we don't care about political issues? That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying it's an okay thing if it's hard for you to kind of where do I fit? That's probably a healthy thing. That's a healthy thing. If it's not just because you want to be a maverick, but because you're looking for what are God's values? What does he care about? What does he love? When we talk about the kingdom is already here in part and not yet in full. So the kingdom is something that we live under God's authority here and now, and we bring God's order to the chaos of our world now, but we also know that we're not going to be the ones to fix the world. There is a branch of Christian theology called postmillennialism, and I can explain that in class if you're curious. But postmillennialism in shorthand is that we need to prepare the world so that Jesus will come back to it. Our church would be premillennialist, which means Jesus could come back at any time, but we don't know when. So while we're here, we're going to be about his purposes, but he can come back and it's not up to us. Postmillennialism is that we have to establish his rule over the world in order to make the way for him to return. But we would say that the kingdom of God is here in part now, but ultimately he will rule over the whole world. He will make that happen. But we live now as representatives of him in the world, as Jesus calls it, salt and light, this preservative and illuminating force in the world. Okay, so you can read through there. God of justice, if you've been at our church for any amount of time, you know that justice is a core part of our church and our beliefs. It's actually written into our statement of faith that God is a God of justice. This is another one of those issues that we often go, oh, that's a secular thing. That's for humanists. That's for social justice warriors, and I'm not one of those. Never let the world take God's idea away from him, make it into something different, and then reject it altogether and throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is your heritage. This is your God. This is his heart, and it's his heartbeat throughout the entire Bible. Just like with creation care and justice, they actually go together, and missionaries will tell you that. But justice is, God invented justice. God's very nature is of justice. That's why we're about justice here. And that's why, again, that not fitting in a box is why, people might be like, well, is it a political thing? But then is it not political enough? And I can't pin it down. Good. God doesn't fit into a box that's easy to pin down. And that's why at our church, we care about justice and needs. Okay. We can, again, I told you this passage, or this chapter is controversial for some, but we can talk about it in class. The Bible tells us that we are dual citizens. So in writing to the Philippians in 1:27, Paul's writing to the dyed-in-the-wool Roman citizens. These were Roman veterans and their families who'd been transported to the Greek city of Philippi in order to Romanize it. Who better to send to Romanize it than the Roman army, right? But the retired Roman army, these are the guys who have, outside they got a flagpole with SPQR, the Roman little slogan there, and the eagle, and you can. These are the guys, right? These are the Roman guys. Well, they were a Roman colony, so they were Roman citizens, and they were pretty prideful about that. And Paul says, hey, guess what? You're actually citizens of heaven. That's your true citizenship. You're citizens of heaven. That same goes for us too. When we get so wrapped up in our world, we have to remember that we are ultimately sojourners here and ultimately citizens of heaven. And on that note, on the next page 148, we need to guard ourselves. We need to guard ourselves, and this goes for all of us, and myself included, on what messages we hear, and what do we let in, and what do we have shape our mind and shape our thinking and get our attention and create our value systems for us. Be careful. If that's not the Bible, then we're wrong. We're going down a path that may look good and right and be full of family values. Let me give you an example of this. A young person in our church was thinking about becoming a missionary, and had purchased a book to try to help with that. And when they took it to their their dad found it, and they said instead of being in any way excited or having any questions, it was, well, you're not gonna do that. You're not gonna get on an airplane. You're not planning on being a missionary, right? Whoa, 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 whoa. We should be careful. We should be not just careful. We should be. Let me put it this way: our culture will tell us that safety, money, comfort, and family are probably the most important things for us. And the Bible will say advancing the gospel is the most important thing, even at the cost of safety, family, money, and comfort. And so we might say, no, I have a biblical viewpoint because I want what's best for my child. And what's best for my child is to stay here and be safe and get a good job. Well, God might not have that priority for your child. Can you line up with God's priority for your child? Or did you get a message you thought was a Christian message that was really just a cultural message and is not a biblical message? So what I'm getting at is we might go, oh yeah, this is meaning don't listen to violent gangster rap. Okay, I don't listen to violent gangster rap. Check, I'm guarding myself from the world. Not necessarily. Guarding yourself from the world might be questioning whether or not a nice suburban house with a picket fence, a dog, and 2 kids was God's ultimate desire for your life and your family's life. You see where I'm going with this? Okay. Okay. I like this quote by Russell Moore, bottom of page 148, from a book called Onward, which I highly recommend. He says, we can learn to be pilgrims again, uneasy in American culture as we should have been all along. But we are not pilgrims cringing in protective silos, waiting for the sound of trumpets in the sky. We are part of a kingdom we see from afar, Hebrews 11:13, and a kingdom we see assembling itself all around us in miniature in these little outposts of the future called the church. Yes, we are foreigners here. We are foreigners here, and we should live as such. But think of yourself as not just foreigners, but missionaries, engaging with the world around us, not being corrupted by it, but actually bringing light to it. And we should be. It's powerful what he says there. We should have always been uncomfortable in American culture. We should have always been uncomfortable here. So if we're too comfortable, if American culture starts looking too much to us like the exact imprint of the gospel, we're missing something. We're missing something about what the Bible really says. We can talk more about this in class. I get disagreed with on this every year. It doesn't bother me anymore, and I'd be happy to talk. We can talk humbly with each other because these are very difficult for some people, but very, 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 very important things that we understand that our loyalty and our citizenship is to God always, always first. Okay. But we will talk more in class. You have a homework assignment that you will have. Really difficult one here. Are you ready for this? Do something this week to care for or enjoy God's creation. Go take a walk. Go watch a National Geographic thing about whales. Go to the zoo. I don't know. Go eat some good fruit from your neighbor's tree, but don't steal. Whatever you want to do. Right. Second, look up a few officials who represent you in government and pray for them. The Bible specifically tells us to pray for those in government authority. Pray also for believers and missionaries living under repressive regimes. You can go to the websites from the chapter on the church. Chapter 6 has those websites. You can go to persecution.com or persecution.org are easy ones to remember. And you can pray for people in countries that where the world power is trying to crush the church out. All right. Thank you, and I will see you next week.